Hey folks, this is The Constant Show where we talk about movies, and I am Constant, your hostess with the mediumist. And this week we will be discussing Space Jam 2, A New Legacy. It's pretty bad. It's downright terrible in a lot of ways. The only people that I would recommend this movie to are LeBron fans who read Ready Player One and then immediately turned around and pre-ordered Ready Player 2. It's for kids, I know, because he's standing in the crowd next to the gang from Clockwork Orange and Jabberjaw, which is a crossover I'd much rather watch, but here we are. As much as I would love to continue dunking on Space Jam 2 A New Legacy for being more unplayable than the monster seated on the sideline, this video is not that. Instead, I would like to look at an interesting thematic through line that a Space Jam 2 A New Legacy begins weaving as soon as its opening scene and carries with it to its stinger. So there's a lot of thematic references to intellectual property and the way that they're handled. And I would like to look at those and the conclusions that can be drawn from them, which is mainly that Space Jam 2 A New Legacy is a critique of itself. Also, I'm counting on you having already watched the movie. So back to that opening scene. LeBron is a kid. He's on the bench and he's playing his Game Boy. He's got his Bugs Bunny booted up on the screen. He gets so focused into it that he misses the shot during a game. So his coach gives him a speech about how he needs to focus and get in the game because one day he could be LeBron James. We flash forward to present day and LeBron's kid is playing on the Nintendo Switch instead of practicing. So LeBron gives him that same speech about how you need to focus. Basketball could one day be your life. It's interesting that all the elements of these two scenes are the same. We have a kid playing a game during a game of basketball. But the specifics and the context of these situations are different because they're separated by so much time and because each one of these individual elements is much different than the other. So LeBron is not his kid, the game system is not a Game Boy, it's a Nintendo Switch. Even basketball itself has changed since LeBron was a kid. Even if something has all the same elements of an experience, it doesn't guarantee that that particular experience will be exactly the same. Then we get to the credits, which is a LeBron highlight reel of his accomplishments throughout his career. It's his likeness and snippets of somebody else's footage packaged together into a favorable format. His best moments are removed from their context and exceptionalized. In essence, if Space Jam 2 were to succeed, right, it would be by bringing out the best elements of itself. So LeBron looks at his kid's game, and it's a basketball game, but it has some subtle changes to it. So whenever somebody gets dunked on, a poster comes up. And LeBron looks at it and goes, oh, it's not real basketball. And the thing is, we'll later learn in the movie, the characters are actually motion captured, so they're exact to the players that they were meant to replicate. But there are aesthetic changes that make LeBron think of it differently. So the real difference between this and real basketball is stylistic, something that's unavoidable if you're emulating a previous story, such as Space Jam 1. The next big plot development that's relevant to the story is that the Warner serververse gets involved. So it's this computer world where each of Warner's intellectual properties is allowed to exist as its own world within the computer. And it's all led by Don Cheadle, who's a super smart AI. And he wants to put LeBron in everything. He wants LeBron fighting Batman. He wants LeBron playing Quidditch. He wants LeBron riding a dragon. But LeBron is watching this on TV, and he is just completely repulsed by the idea, saying, I quote, I'm a basketball player. I can't act. I'm not going to take off a year in my prime to make movies. This is the worst idea I've ever heard. Bottom 5. He says top 5 easily, but it would make sense if it was the bottom 5 if these are like your least favorite ideas. I guess what I'm saying is that LeBron doesn't know how to categorize things. Roasted. So I had to think about this line for a while, and when I was thinking about it, at surface level, right, it's a critique of this movie itself. However, since that criticism actually applies to both this and the first one, it sort of questions the legitimacy of Michael Jordan taking the time off to make Space Jam in what would be his prime. Because even after he came back to basketball, he's Michael Jordan. Keep that in mind, it will be relevant later. So LeBron gets sucked into the serververse with his son, and Don Cheadle, the AI, wants to play basketball with him, because of course he does. LeBron doesn't want to play basketball, he kind of just wants to be reunited with his son and get out of this computer. And because of it, he gets punished by Don Cheadle, the AI bot. He gets sent to the rejects, as he calls them. The rejects are the Looney Tunes. I was really puzzled by this choice because we know that these specific Looney Tunes have been through at least something like Space Jam 1, because both Bugs Bunny and Lola Bunny reference it at separate points throughout the movie. So why would Don Cheadle, the AI bot, consider them to be rejects? And then upon thinking about it, I realized that Looney Tunes weren't in those that the Don Cheadle AI bot had put on the screen. He wanted him in Quidditch, Batman. He didn't want him in Looney Tunes. Space Jam 1 was never amongst Don Cheadle, the AI bot's consideration, in the same way that it wasn't among the filmmakers. Roasted. Whenever LeBron gets to Toon World is my favorite part of the movie, because Bugs Bunny is like Solo in Looney Tune World, and he tries to like drag LeBron through a bunch of Looney Tune style skits. And it's interesting when you look at this part thematically, because Bugs Bunny is trying to recreate past experiences, but these scenes are void of the substance and personalities that made them what they were. So for instance, with the Duck Season, Rabbit Season skit, a huge part of it is that ducks and rabbits are both prey type animals, so Elmer Fudd's going to hunt one of them. So as they're removing each one of them, they're basically putting the other one in jeopardy, and it gives each of these characters an incentive in those circumstances to do those things. LeBron doesn't have any stakes or personal involvement with the Looney Tunes. The next sequence is a cavalcade of commercials for Warner properties, as each of the Looney Tunes is in a different Warner Silververse world. So Yosemite Sam is in Casablanca, Sylvester is in Mad Max, Daffy Duck in Superman, Lola Bunny is in Amazon. This serves the dual purpose of demonstrating that characters can exist in variant forms, but at the same time, one of the things that comes up, the Yosemite Sam in Casablanca, Casablanca is considered like the most classic of classic movies. That's kind of what happens with some of these crossovers, where it seems disrespectful to one side, and to the other it's just not a good opportunity for them to thrive because it doesn't play to their strength. In the same way, forcing LeBron into Looney Tunes to complain about the idea is actually an example of both. Each time they go there, Bugs Bunny pulls this bait and switch with him. For instance, in the Superman one, whenever he gets there, Daffy Duck is dressed like Superman and he's Super Duck. In the same way, when you take characters that have a history, it's always going to be part of a bait and switch as you emulate them for a new generation. Like each variant Scooby-Doo is a little bit different than the other incarnations of the character. LeBron Jr. has an app that he uses to copy the likeness of players. The villain capitalizes on this, and he uses his phone to capture the likeness of a bunch of other real people so that he can later suck them into the game world. This sort of speaks to the interplay between LeBron as a person and LeBron as a character. So in one sense, the character is indistinguishable from the person. There's multiple points where they reference LeBron team hopping. There's a limit to what cartoon LeBron can do because of who real LeBron is as a person. In the same way, there's a limit to how far Looney Tunes or any other intellectual property could stretch to accommodate something else. Whenever Bugs Bunny is going to recruit the team and stuff, he keeps telling LeBron that they're going to get the people that LeBron wants, because LeBron's idea of a team is he wants Superman and King Kong and Mad Max, and Warner doesn't have that many properties. So then we get to the basketball game, and at the basketball game we get our second major exemplification that sometimes a company owning too many intellectual properties is a terrible idea. At the basketball game, the crowd is half filled with random people and then half filled with like random characters. And you have Jabberjaw and Scooby-Doo and Pennywise the Clown and the people from Clockwork Orange, and I think there's some Alice in Wonderland characters there. I'm sure if you looked hard enough you would find Superman in the background. This isn't a countdown of cameos, I'm just saying there's a lot of them. And that's the thing about having so many characters jammed together, is each successive character that you add to that franchise now takes up a little bit of that screen time. And if you add too many of them, it gets to the point where it's just a never-ending string of cameos. And at other times, it kind of detracts focus. Because instead of focusing on the basketball game, I'm like, wait, is that really the gang from Clockwork Orange? What are they doing here? How did they get here? So when the basketball game starts, the tunes get upgraded. It's basically just them turning from 2D to 3D. And at first, the characters themselves are horrified by it. They're like, ah, no! But then it happens, and it turns out that they're still the exact same characters. You can shift characters, right? There's a window of where a character is changed but still the same. On the opposite side, we also have an altered image team, because instead of stealing players' talents like in the first movie, they downloaded players' exact likeness and then combined it with animals and insects. So either you're going to have superficial changes to the characters, or you're going to have distorted ones that alter the character so much that they're no longer recognizable as the character that they originally were. We can think of these as the branching fork that Space Jam 2 could have gone down. Skipping forward to halftime, LeBron is just going off on the Tunes for not being better ballers. This is a very true-to-life moment for LeBron. I can only imagine how many of these speeches he's given before. Look, I am the best player on this team right now, and nobody is helping. I feel like he gives those speeches all the time. I feel like when him and his wife go to soccer practice, he gives that speech in the car. We realize during this scene that the problem is that the Looney Tunes aren't being themselves. They're trying to be LeBron. And anytime you merge two properties, you're always going to have that negotiation of how much of either one can actually influence it. If you have Looney Tunes characters doing Game of Thrones stuff, like beheading each other, it starts to feel a lot less like Looney Tunes. The problem is that the Tunes aren't being themselves. Interestingly, this realization is juxtaposed with the Porky the Pig rap scene. And it's an exemplification of the very problems of trying to rework these characters into relevancy. This is further contrasted by Wile E. Coyote getting stuck in a machine that shoots basketballs, and he ends up duplicating a bunch of himself. And it works, and he scores repeatedly. And the message there is that you can machine these out if the character is still the same character. Following this, LeBron's son has a change of heart, and he realizes that he wants to play for his dad's team. And when he goes to go over to his dad's team, the villain of the movie points out that he's wearing the Goon Squad jersey, and because of it, he can't. We can look at this as almost representative of the way that branding and creative control can affect characters. Once Disney takes a character under their umbrella, they're a lot stricter on the ways in which that character can be used. And the bigger a company is that has a character, the more restrictions there's going to be towards that kind of thing. The game-winning shot in the movie is performed by Bugs, and he's emulating LeBron's magic step. He glitches the game and potentially erases himself from existence. The more that a character has to conform to match a mold, the greater risk it runs of erasing itself entirely. When the villain is busted at the end of the movie, he turns into a poster, which is a 2D representation of himself lacking his previous capability. And then Bugs Bunny appears in the real world somehow. So what does it all mean? What's the message? I think the big one is that Space Jam 2 was just never going to work. LeBron's son in the movie and LeBron love basketball in the same way that LeBron and Michael Jordan do. And that is to say that they love it differently. In the original, Jordan's character arc was about him regaining his love of basketball after switching to baseball. LeBron in this movie doesn't really have a character arc. There's a couple that it tries to present to us. The first one, that he's too serious about basketball, which seems strange because the movie also glorifies him a lot for playing basketball. He doesn't even have to trick the villain into balling out. That's the villain's idea, just because he wants to play basketball with LeBron James. And the second one that it presents to us, that he needs to be more family-oriented. Even before the halftime speech, as soon as he gets to Toon World, as soon as he gets to the Warner serververse, he's already concerned with getting back to his son. It's not like he's neglectful or even a bad dad. In his first meeting with the executives, he flat out talks about how he has nothing to actually gain from this. For the Looney Tunes, they don't fit into Casablanca or Mad Max in the same way that LeBron doesn't fit into Space Jam, and in the same way that Space Jam 2 doesn't fit as a sequel to Space Jam 1. It doesn't mean that we can't still have stories with these characters, but there are problems with retelling the same stories that we've already heard. As evidenced by our opening scene, no experience is really emulatable or perfectly replicable, and especially not in regards to your feelings towards it. The original Space Jam was magic. The ideal basketball player at the perfect point in his life and career, matched with just the right amount of intellectual property, and you get this miracle of a movie that has no reason on paper to be as good as it actually is. And when you have something like this, any other successful crossover, there's financial motivations to do it again. For every Avengers or Freddy vs. Jason or Wreck-It Ralph that you get, you're eventually going to run into these points where a company has so much intellectual property that they really don't have any time to do anything with any of them. Sit in the background, Pennywise. You have this financial motivation to cram as many of these as you can together to reach as many possible fan bases as you can. One change that stood out to me is that in the original, the Monstars were after the basketball player's talent. That's what they stole. In this one, the computer wants LeBron and his fame. Companies don't care about these characters or their merits, as rather than appealing to as much of the character's talent as possible, it's instead about cultivating as much recognizability. It's like the Wile E. Coyote replication machine. The machine only works if it's producing the character that we know and love. Remember, the special stuff that the Looney Tunes had in the first one was inside those characters all along. And for anybody who disagrees with me that they weren't aware that Space Jam 2 was just bad by default, the villain of the movie is Warner for making this movie. They were like, we know we suck for doing this. That's been Space Jam 2, A New Adventure. Those are my thoughts. You can watch it on HBO Max if you haven't seen it. I probably should have told you at the top of the video. You get a piece of paper and then you just write down how many characters you see. That's how we play movies now.